I'm a lawyer, and these are the craziest things that the cops can do when they pull you over. In the United States, there are 60,000 traffic stops per day. That's almost 20 million in a year. And of those 60,000, about 1,000 per day result in arrests. Not very demure, not very considerate, not very mindful.
Very mindful.
Hey everyone, it's Eric Jenkins, lawyer with the Advocates Injury Attorneys. So what can you do when you get pulled over? Well, in Colorado last year, this guy tried to switch places with his dog. I guess to trick the cop into thinking the dog was driving?
Bruh.
In Washington State, this guy tried to bribe the officer with pizza. That didn't work, probably because they've got terrible pizza in Washington State. In Atlanta last year, a guy tried to bribe the cop with $200, then $400 and a beer. That resulted in an open container violation. Generally, most people interact with cops during a traffic stop. And those sneaky cops, they use a couple of tricks to try to get evidence against you. The first is the good guy cop. He's gonna act like he's your friend, he's your buddy. He just wants to talk about the weather or sports or whatever's going on in your life. This is a lie. Everything you say during a traffic stop can and will be used against you in a court of law. The police are not there to be your friends. They are there to gather evidence. You need to be very careful about what you say during these conversations, and that includes never admitting to guilt. Now, you should always be courteous and polite, but the police officer is not your friend. Another tactic the cops will use is asking for consent. Generally, when a police officer pulls you over, they are not allowed to search your car, but they can ask if they can search your car. And if you say yes, they will search it. And it is okay to say no. There is no reason to allow a police officer to search your car. You saying no to a search is not evidence of wrongdoing. Always, always, always say no to searches. Now, another strategy the cops will use is an appeal to authority. Now, cops are authority figures, and we generally feel like we should do what an authority figure says. But you need to fight against that instinct. The police officers are bound by very strict rules regarding what they can and can't do at a traffic stop. But if you tell them they can do more just because of their show of authority, then they're allowed to. They can push those boundaries as long as you keep saying yes. So don't say yes just because you feel like the cop's an authority. During your interactions with a police officer, remember that they are a public servant. They are there to serve and protect you. You don't have to do anything they say just because they're a cop. Another strategy the cops will use is lying. That's right, the cops can lie to you. This is especially the case when another infraction has occurred that has allowed the cop to pull you over. Let me give you an example. One of the landmark cases about cops lying involved an individual who was suspected of transporting illegal substances. So the cops were watching him very closely. One day he was driving down the street and he changed lanes without signaling. And so the cops pulled him over. When he asked the cops, "Why did you pull me over?" they said, "Oh, it's because you changed lanes without signaling." And in truth, they had been waiting for an excuse to pull him over, hoping that they could search his car, looking for whatever they might find. Turns out they did find some things in his car, some things that weren't supposed to be there, and he was prosecuted. When this case was eventually argued in the trial court and in the Court of Appeals, the judges found that the cops can lie to an individual about the true reason they are being pulled over. This is especially the case when there's some kind of illusory or minor infraction that they could use to justify pulling you over, even if the truth is they want to get to talk to you for another bigger reason. So what can you do when a cop pulls you over? Well, first of all, recently there's been a lot of talk about the idea of being a sovereign citizen. These are usually people that have read something on the internet and have the idea that they're not actually citizens of the state where they reside. Recently, a sovereign citizen in Farmington, Utah was unalived during a traffic stop. He reached for a firearm because he didn't think the cop had the authority to pull him over. So let me just be clear, this idea of being a sovereign citizen is absolute nonsense. It's not going to help you when you're pulled over, and it's definitely not going to help you in court. So don't try it. You always have the right to remain silent. Now, in most jurisdictions, you do need to identify yourself. You do need to hand over your driver's license and your proof of insurance. In some states, you may even need to provide very basic identifying information, like your address. But that's it. You don't have to say anything to the police officer you don't want to. Now, if you're concerned concerned that a police officer is building a case against you, I recommend that you be courteous but firm and tell them, I don't want to answer any more questions. That response is not admissible in a court of law. It is always best, when you're in doubt, to tell the police officer, I don't want to answer any more questions. You always have the right to refuse a search. Like we talked to earlier, a cop will often ask, hey, can I take a look in your trunk? Can I see what's in your glove compartment? You can say no for any reason or for no reason at all. The reason a cop will ask to search your car is because he knows he's not allowed to. So if you say no, he generally can. That answer is not an admission of guilt. Finally, you have the right to record your interactions with a police officer. These rights vary significantly from state to state, and with everything that I'm saying here, you need to make sure that this is accurate in your jurisdiction. But generally, you can record a police officer. That recording can happen in public, or in some states, you can secretly record a police officer. But in any event, these types of recordings provide important evidence in the event that your case goes to trial. So whenever you're pulled over by a police officer, start the recording. There's really no reason not to. You know, I tell my clients that a little bit of courtesy often goes a long way. I mean, the truth is most of these traffic interactions are not combative and aren't really that big of a deal. Be nice to the officer. He or she are generally there to do their job. Usually they've pulled me over because I am speeding. I tell my clients to keep their hands visible, usually on the steering wheel, because cops really get a little antsy if they can't see what you're doing. Unroll the window as the officer approaches and go ahead and exchange pleasantries. There's nothing to be gained by being combative with the officer. If you get the impression that the officer is pushing his boundaries or trying to build a case from you, be polite but firm. Officer, I don't want to answer any more questions. As you're talking with the officer, don't make any admissions to wrongdoing. At some point, the officer will likely say, do you know why I pulled you over? That's one of their tricks, and you should just respond by saying, I don't. What's going on? Don't admit to doing anything wrong. If you feel like any of your rights have been violated during the traffic stop, be sure to document those types of things. Like I said earlier, it's best to record the interaction, but if you've forgotten to hit record, make sure you write those types of things down as soon as you can. In the end, it's best to be friendly to the cop, be short with your answers, and to never, ever admit to doing something wrong.